Hello and welcome to the Daily Space for today, March 20th, 2020. I am your host, Dr. Pamela Gay, and I am here to put science in your brain. It is Friday of a week that has somehow lasted 20 years. But we're going to end this week with some of the, least expected science of my life. Specifically, we're going to talk about how a team of researchers from my own institution, the Planetary Science Institute, have determined that once upon a time, long, long ago, there were volatiles, water, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, things that, go into building life, present on the hottest, not actually, what should be the hottest world in our solar system. And I'm talking about Mercury. Now, on a world like Mercury that's snuggled up against the sun, you have a surface that is inhospitable for so many different reasons. It is getting blasted with so much sunlight that, the ultraviolet is quite deadly. Very, very deadly. It is getting blasted with so much sunlight at so close a distance that the radiation pressure is enough to pop ions off the surface of this world. And it's also just tiny and compact and not exactly the kind of place that really gives life a place to dig in. But the world we see now isn't the world that always was. In the past, before Mercury got baked into the hard, dense little thing it is today, before it got hit numerous times by massive asteroids, it was a little lower density, it had a few more elements, and it's just possible that beneath the surface, the circumstances may have been, good enough. We're not going to say great. We're going to say good enough for life to have at least done the prebiotic chemistry bit of starting to think about coming into existence. So the place that was looked at is what's called the antipode to the Closeup Basin. In this image that I'm showing you, there's that gorgeous large circle in the upper right-hand quadrant. This is a lighter area left over from the impact of some sort of a large object in the past. This is Closeup Basin. And all the way on the other side of the world, rarely imaged until MESSENGER got there, and never well imaged until MESSENGER got there, is a chaotic terrain where the shock waves that propagated through and around Mercury lifted up and mangled the surface of Mercury opposite of where that basin was formed. It's in this chaotic terrain that the team looked to see what they could see, and they discovered that the terrain appears to have collapsed in various places, revealing, how various volatiles escaped, eroding away the surface, not in the ways that we're used to through the flow of water or the blowing of air, but rather through the sublimation of these gases. And the fact that they can see the remnants of where these materials used to be indicates that in the past, those materials used to be there and could have been used by life to, exist. These are early days. This paper hides behind a paywall. And this is science that's hard to follow. So we're in the process of working to get Alexis Rodriguez, who's the lead author on this paper in Nature, to come on and talk to us about these results. But the key thing I want you to walk away with is in the past, beneath the surface on Mercury, there was the chemistry necessary to get life started. And because it was beneath the surface, it was sheltered from the harsh rays of the sun. And it is possible that given the chemistry, given the sheltering beneath the surface? Well, it looks like every world in our solar system either was capable of supporting life or had moons capable of supporting life, as long as they weren't too frozen. So everything inside of Saturn, it looks like, maybe once gave life a chance. And that's a cool thing to think about on a Friday. Now, from this piece of rather unexpected science, we're going to jump over to something more expected. In this case, it is a look at how you get a rubble pile asteroid like Ryugu or Bennu. Scientists who've been studying this particular little asteroid have realized, thanks to the data of a myriad of little tiny robotic probes the Japanese dropped on the surface of this asteroid, they've realized that the rocks on the surface are porous. This means that they're lightweight. They have a lot of space between the molecules. They've realized that something had to have happened to essentially fluff up this mineralogy. They can see that this is a world of dust and small rocks and bigger rocks, all loosely held together with gravity. And a team of researchers in Germany have used computer models to figure out how a bunch of, dust grains gathered their friends, grew into dust bunnies, grew up into porous dust rocks, grew up into full-fledged asteroids that even had a core, and then underwent collisions and were reduced to a rubble pile of porous rocks. So this is a fossil of the processes that went on early in our solar system. It is giving us a chance to see that our idea that the way some of these worlds grow is through the accumulation of dust particles colliding and merging and finding others and colliding and merging, that over time, through this collisional process, we can build the planetesimals that eventually develop enough gravity to gravitationally pull in other material. It also goes to show us that early in the early in our solar system, collisions were common. Not everything survived the process. In this case, we're looking at a world that formed, broke apart, and then, gravitationally came back together as a shattered version of itself. I also have to point out that this press release has one of my best scientific English phrases. The language of science is broken English, and you occasionally come across fantastic statements, and this is one of my favorite. Infrared images show that Ryugu is almost entirely made up. Now, my American English reading of this is an imaginary asteroid. I'm pretty sure that this is supposed to mean that it's just a whole bunch of stuff that got piled up. Maybe someone forgot the second half of the sentence. I don't know. But hitting that this morning pre-coffee, the idea that a rubble pile asteroid is a figment of all of our own imaginations, it's a Friday. I needed to share. All right, moving on to our final story of the day. Those of you who like to get outside with telescopes and look up may have noticed over the years that, the great red spot in Jupiter is a little less great than it used to be. It has been changing ever so slightly in color, not that this particular set of images from the Hubble Space Telescope captures that very well. But in addition to slightly changing color, it has also reduced in size. And this reduction in size is one of those things where, since we can't figure out what generated this thing to begin with, it's really hard to explain why it's shrinking after 350 years of hanging out where we can see it. It's unclear if it was there before Galileo spotted it, simply because we don't have the data. But we know, at least since Galileo started looking with his telescope, it's been there. and now it's shrinking. And so the question has been, is it shrinking only in width, or is it also shrinking in the depth that it has to descend down into the atmosphere? We can't go and measure that. While the Juno mission can do great things, imaging Jupiter, taking a breathtaking range of different data, it can't exactly fly into the atmosphere. But what we can do is we can combine the images taken and the other data taken by Juno with its predecessor Galileo's data. We can build computer models and see what the physics allows to happen using a variety of, meteorological models that are conformed to Jupiter's specific temperatures, densities, and chemistry. And this is exactly what a group of scientists have been doing. And what they discovered is it looks like these systems, they always have the same height. So this is some sort of it's always discussed as a hurricane that reaches from the top of the atmosphere down to the, surface is the wrong word, reaches down always to the same consistent density level in the atmosphere. And it just keeps churning along, driven by the internal heat of the world and who knows what else. So Jupiter's Great Red Spot is simply going from a very large cone of one height to a much skinnier cone of the same height. It's essentially a cone on a diet. And that's really all we've got today. So this has been the Daily Space. I am your host, Dr. Pamela Gay, and I am the author of this episode, which will go up very late today, Friday, March 20th, but it will go up on our websites nonetheless. We are a product of the Planetary Science Institute, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to exploration of our solar system and beyond. This episode is produced by Susie Murph, and we are here thanks to the generous contributions of people like you. We couldn't do what we do without your bits, your subs, and most importantly of all, your patronage at patreon.com/CosmoQuestX. If you haven't given, please consider subscribing for just $1 a month. If all of our listeners did that, it would allow us to pay Annie all the hours that she puts into putting together the rocket roundups on Wednesdays. Please, just $1. Anyways, if you can't give, we get it. We're seeing the impacts of layoffs and hour cuts all across our own community. Spread the word. We're going to be here to get through these current weird times together. Join us, tell your friends to join us, and let's escape into science and go explore other worlds, while our own world is someplace we may not want to think too hard about. All right, that's all I've got. I'm now going to look for your questions in the chat. Please precede them with that purple circle with a purple star in the center, and I'll go ahead and answer everything I can. All right. Oh, I'm sorry, AstroWise. I get it, though. I totally get it. Scrolling to the top. Thank you, AstroWise, for the sub. Thank you. Good evening, Guido. Welcome, Habelius. Rebellious? I'm not sure how to say your name. Hello, The Spaceway. Hello, Wayne Johnson. Hello, Veronica Cure. Hello, Larry Weird. Oh, that's right. We do have a new Grey's Anatomy. That is exciting. This is a heartbreaking season on that show, but isn't it always? Hello, Binary Ablaze. Hello, Broken Symmetry. No, there are no vampires on Mercury, not unless they manage to move their housing around the world at the same rate that it's rotating, which conceptually is possible, but we see no evidence of railroad tracks. All right. Hello, DPI. If I missed saying hello to anyone, I'm sorry. Wayne Johnson loves rocks. Somebody needs to love rocks. Thank you, the Space Wave, for the bits. Thank you. I have no Cheerios to throw to dogs or a working dog cam. Both those things will be fixed for Monday. Hello, Ironheart50. Oh, the emotes. Hello, Dreamboat68. Okay, Astrowise has a question. Is there an Earth analogy for the kind of porous rocks of these asteroids, like pumice or something else? Pumice is actually a really good analogy, although the minerals on these rocks, these asteroids, have a higher carbon content than some pumice stone does. So I'm trying to think. Like lava rock is actually probably the best analogy. That super loose, you can see the pores in it. Stone that you can get at the garden shop that doesn't weigh very much, or or that you might pick up at a fish tank store or an aquarium store rather. That kind of porous lava rock is a really good example. Sandstone is another really porous rock that exists on multiple worlds. Again, I don't know its carbon content. This is something I should look up, the carbon content in more rocks and figure it out. That's a good question, Astro YYZ. Thanks, Little Switch, for the Twitch Prime sub. Thank you so much. So Larry asks, how big could an O'Neill cylinder be? Will the stuff of Bennu or harder one to spell Ryugu? How big could an O'Neill cylinder... So I think you're asking how big of an O'Neill cylinder could we build using the stuff of Ryugu or Bennu? I don't know. They're so tiny. I don't think you could build much with them. I don't even think you could build a substantial castle on the moon if you used all the rocks in Ryugu and Bennu. For comparison, we have buildings on Earth that you could put Bennu inside of. These are small asteroids. Yes, Mercury is shrinking. It's kind of awesome. Flask, it's made up. A secret alien plot. Yes, Ryugu is completely made up. It is true, Flask. It is true. Also, I kind of love your username. JB McCool says, whose imagination created Bennu? An evil genius. An evil genius. We're going to go with that. Rabalius comments, it's merely the adequate red spot now. It's true. It's true. It's a beauty mark at this point. Jupiter just has a beauty mark. Binary Plays comments that it was Cthulhu that came up with Bennu. An elder god. Yeah, I can see that happening. I can see it. Yeah, we're going to go with an elder god. I don't know what's going on. Anyways, I am continuing on. Broken Symmetry asks, what would Jupiter's red spot storm be more intense deep down as it shrinks and maybe tightens? I don't know. I was so irritated today. All three of the papers were behind a paywall. So I actually pay money to access the one that was about potential Mercury life. And then I discovered I don't know enough chemistry to really make sense of that paper, which is why we're going to look into having the scientists on. But the other two papers I'm going to have to pirate in order to read their science. So since I couldn't read all the details on the Great Red Spot paper because paywall, and I have no qualms pirating information. Information should be free. I don't know what their models said, but what I was thinking about is when we have hurricanes, they are significantly more powerful the wider they are. And when we have tornadoes, unlike the Great Red Hot Spot, can vary in depth. That you can actually see the cloud come down and touch the ground. But again, their power is related to their width. So I'm thinking with the Great Red Spot that the storms must be reducing as the width decreases based on atmospheric phenomena we see here on the planet Earth. Now, I do, as I said, need to go pirate the paper so I can read the details. Science should be free. Okay, let's see what else we have in here. Feed Annie. Yes, please help us feed Annie. She's in the process of moving cross country to get to a safer part of this nation. She's actually going to be near me, and that has me very excited, although we will be experiencing social distancing. And not hanging out and playing board games and drinking beer was planned when all of this started. But here is to hoping for a very quick suppression of the hellscape that is going on around us so that beer and board games may happen. Thank you, Autumn Rain, for the Twitch Prime sub. Thank you so much, Autumn Rain. Thank you, Keeper of Maps, for the reminder to everyone to wash their hands. Thank you. Solari goes on to ask, any solid layers before you hit high pressure molten metallic hydrogen on Jupiter? So one of the things that I always struggle with is the everyday words that we use, like solid, liquid, and gas, because these have very specific day-to-day things that we think about. The air around me is a solid. The coffee in my coffee cup is a liquid. The coffee cup itself, the desk I sit it upon, is solid. I personally am a bag of mostly liquid with a solid bone structure that breathes in gas. We feel and experience these three words within the temperature and pressure regime that we live in. At the surface of the Earth, at the 0 to 50 degrees Celsius, or actually minus 40 to positive 60 degrees Celsius that we experience, we understand these words in a very particular way. But in terms of how things interact with one another, we can describe the insides of stars as a liquid in the way that we're used to thinking about liquid, even though it's really like physically a plasma. We describe particles in the rings of Saturn using the equations for a liquid. We know that the inner parts of Jupiter likely act physically like a crystal, but a crystal that if you tried to set things on would get engulfed and squished to death. So there are parts of Jupiter that are so dense that were they hanging out at that density at the surface of the planet Earth, we'd go, yes, that is a solid. But their density is driven by everything. So I don't know how to answer that question because language is trickstery. There is no surface upon which I could stand you and you would not sink deeper. But there are areas that I could set you on that you would sink through while being dead, so I would never do that, that have densities similar to my desk. How's that for a confusing answer? It's the one, asks. Some people say that one satellite in orbit exploding when it gets hit can wipe out a lot of other satellites because of the microdegree cascading. Is this true or an urban myth? It is totally true if it happens in the wrong place. Within low Earth orbits, satellites are constantly recrossing one another's paths. And so in this dense area of space around our planet, where things are constantly moving with different velocities on slightly different trajectories, as some are going around the planet over the poles, some are going around more close to the equator, and every inclination in between, and not just in circular orbits, but also in elliptical orbits. If something blew up or two systems collided, it could take out a whole lot of other stuff by spreading chunks of satellite in all directions. And we've come close to having to worry about this before. I forget which nation it was, and I think it was China, tested the ability to blow up one of its satellites by blowing up one of its satellites. And now there's a debris field that we have to very carefully monitor and work to avoid that debris. We actually moved the International Space Station, which is a giant kind of fragile, looks like it was built out of Legos habitat. We move it around to dodge stuff the size of coffee cups and dinner plates. It's not coffee cups and dinner plates. It's random shit. So yeah, it could be a real problem. As you get into higher orbits, because things are all moving pretty much together in the same direction, it's less of an issue. So for instance, the orbital space directly above the equator at geosynchronous altitude. So this is the distance from the Earth that allows a spacecraft to orbit while maintaining its position over a place along the equator. These satellites, they're all basically flying in formation, maintaining their spacing as they're locked in over their location on the Earth. So up there, if you lose something, yes, it's a problem. And those are some of our most necessary satellites. But the satellites aren't constantly crossing one another's paths. So it's less of an issue. I hope that answered your question. No, it's not an urban legend. Let's see what else is in here. So Astro YYZ applied to something. Oh, the COVID-19 support. Yeah, we're all trying to figure out exactly what is going to happen. YouTube Zero Admin is like, House on Wheels. I think you're referring to what I was talking about on Mercury for vampires. So in all fairness, that is not my own idea. Kim Stanley Robinson, who's one of my favorite authors, has, oh man, I can't remember which of his books it is. I want to say it's one of the books that has like a 4-digit year number that's in the not too distant future as its title. In the book, one of the concepts was, as we go out looking to occupy every possible place in our solar system because the Earth's environment has collapsed and we're trying to allow the Earth to rebuild, people went out and they built a colony on railroad tracks on Mercury that constantly moved to stay just ahead of the Terminator, living in this twilight where they would neither freeze nor fry. It's just a really cool idea of having an entire city ever so slowly moving across the planet. It's very doomsday, and there's been plenty of dystopian fiction along these ideas. Yeah, I kind of love it. I like the way Larry put it. I love rocks. In crowds below 100, please. Bennu had a few too many rocks. So Keeper of Maps, now I know that you're here. Pumice, what is pumice made of? I don't know. I just don't know. And they sell lava rocks for fish tanks. You shouldn't put them in all fish tanks, but there's certain fish that do better if they have a few lava rocks because of the minerals they release into the water. Yeah. I need to know more about what you're thinking. So an O'Neill cylinder is mostly air, but there's not that much mass in Ryugu and Bennu. Like, I suspect you couldn't rebuild all of the castles in Europe using the rocks in Bennu and Ryugu. I suspect all the castles in Europe contain in their fortifications more rocks than these asteroids. It's really not a lot of mass. It's really kind of amazing. So Annie, there's a place called Science Hub where it's a Russian website that I don't know how they scrape all the journal articles and put them out for free on one place. So I just need to go there. Emailing the authors doesn't always work, actually, because that requires them to check their email and have time to respond. So yeah, I just am going to go pirate them. It's beer and remote games right now for all of us. Well, that's the thing. We're trying to slowly, I'm allowing myself one beverage a day. Let's see. Wayne is sharing a link. I'm going to click on it. UK pubs and restaurants told to shut. That is, yeah, we're having the same thing here. I like the way you phrase that, DPI. Just thinking like a proton and staying positive. That works. Cheers. Cheers. Okay, I'm going to catch up after this between what Annie and YouTube are discussing. Good morning, Planetary Pan. Larry writes, the net liberates information, stage 1. Robot will liberate surfaces, stage 2. Advanced 3D printers will liberate goods, stage 3. Then money will be obsolete. This is what I'm hoping. So we live in awful times. Let's just full stop, admit that. It's fine. It's not fine, but let's admit we live in an awful time. But people are often driven by necessity to break the rules and try things that otherwise fear would have limited them from doing. And people are often, out of desperation, called to rely on people in ways they otherwise would never have done. One of the things that I've been seeing happen is a desperate plea being sent out to people who have 3D printers all over the US. Can you print masks? Can you print medical bits and pieces and odds and ends? The makers are going to get us through this. And we're going to learn a new level of trust. Yes, you can trust your employees to work from home. A lot of companies refused to acknowledge that and kept up the requirements that their employees had to suffer through long drives, had to spend money on gas that polluted the atmosphere, had to spend 2 hours a day in some cases away from their family just getting to and from work. Work that was nothing more than going in and sitting at a computer we can take those jobs home. We're seeing shows like the Rachel Maddow show, like so many of the late night talk shows. They're essentially producing their shows the way we produce ours, with a green screen behind the host. And I suspect they're using Wirecast as well. And they spent more money so you don't see their mics. We're learning what we can do in each of our own little capsules of humanity, my house, your apartment, each of these places. And we're learning to find each other through the internet. Always look for the helpers. In this case, always look for the makers. And I'm hoping that when all of this is over, people are going to look at the massive roads in Atlanta, in Los Angeles, and they're going to say, for weeks, for months, those roads were mostly empty because people worked from home. Instead of building more roads, let's build more bandwidth. Let's keep finding ways to live in our own small communities instead of requiring massive cities and connect like this. Anyways, it's my hope that there will be some good, some changes to humanity, the realization that it's all right to have national health care, the realization that everyone deserves a minimum income to allow them food and dignity. They're in some places working to find homeless people and match them up with motel rooms, with abandoned houses, with apartments that stand empty so that they can each have their own place. And research has always shown that having a place to live gives you a fresh start for a fresh life off the streets. I wish it didn't take millions of people dying, which is what we're looking at. I don't know what world we're going to live in 2 years. It's going to be a very different one from today. And there's going to be a lot broken. I made the mistake of looking at my retirement account last night, and it is 30% below where it was in December. A lot of things are going to be broken. My husband and I were joking about, well, this is the diet plan we can't break. But we're going to rebuild something new. And we're going to get through this together. I'm just going to keep saying that. I have you, you have me. We're going to get through this together. All right. What all do you have in the chat? Larry comments, I understand. I imagine molten metallic hydrogen at that pressure and temperature is ultra solvent. I don't know. I just know it's something it's crazy. There are 3 buddies in space, says Annie. What do they do with the excrement from the ISS? That's an Annie question, Stealth DJ. Hopefully Annie knows. I once knew, and then my brain lost that information. It's 2312, the name of the book by Kim Stanley Robinson that I couldn't remember. I just remember it was a 4-digit number. Fellow Hoodlum has the book. It's an excellent book. It's part of a 2-book, not advertised as a series, but it's clearly the same universe. Actually, there may be 3 in that same universe. It's really excellent. Larry says, which Kim Stanley Robinson novel do you recommend to start with first? Red Mars. Red Mars is where you should always start first. Yeah. Bennu is a rock hoarder. It's true, Broken Symmetry. Bennu hoarded rocks. So did Ryugu, and then they went to their opposite corners of the near-Earth orbital space. So Keeper of Maps says pumice is basically volcanic glass with lots of bubbles in it. That's cool. I don't know why, but I thought pumice was related to coral. Clearly, I don't know my rocks or minerals at all. Okay, continuing on. So YouTube comment says, imagine landing on an asteroid and it being loosely joined rocks and you fall right through. So that won't happen any more than if you stand on a pile of gravel in your driveway, you're going to fall right through. Yes, you can displace things, you can trigger landslides, but ultimately these things are held together through a mixture of gravity and friction and some chemical bonds, cementing things together. So you're not going to fall through, but it's certainly not like landing on the surface of the moon. It's much more like a gravel pile in your driveway. Scoria is another type of volcanic rock with larger bubbles, and it is typically darker and denser. Oh, wow. Larry already finished his morning ale. Your day is much better than mine. Yeah, Veronica Cure says local hospital is providing kits for people to sew masks. Yeah, it's true. All across the U.S., hospitals are running out of masks. Here in St. Louis, where we don't have a major outbreak, the scarcity of ability to get masks means that our major research teaching hospital in St. Louis, Barnes-Jewish, has started reserving its N95 respirator masks that it normally uses during surgery for dealing with contagious issues. So during surgery, they're using loose-fitting masks that normally they would never use during surgery. YouTube says, why pay for a large building and power to have people there working when if they work from home, all you have to pay for is a proxy and some Cisco phones? That's entirely true. My husband worked for a medical software company. He still does, but it just recently got bought. So the way that they hire employees has changed. Up until they were purchased by a different company, the entire company, CEO down to HR person and everyone in between, that's the wrong way of putting it. The HR person is not at the bottom. The HR person is near the senior, but in a different division that usually literally sits next to the CEO. Everyone in the company, from the salespeople to the help people to the engineering staff to the HR, everyone in the company was entirely remote. Some of them were in the same city, but everyone was remote, and they worked using Microsoft Teams, and just they lived on their software on their computers, and this meant they didn't have to pay people. And the other savings they found is where I live here in the Midwest, the cost of living is a whole lot less. We live in a rambling old farmhouse that has a whole lot of issues. But it's a big old house. And if we had this exact same house within an hour's drive of Boston, instead of being a completely reasonably priced house, it would have been a multi-million-dollar house. But here, it's the same price as a 2-bedroom in Sacramento. So if you can hire engineers that don't have to live on a coast, they can have a better quality of living by living somewhere in the middle of the country. And one of the things that the company saw is they'd hire someone living in a big city, and then they'd promptly move somewhere with better schools and a yard for their kids. So it's a way to fill back in all the ghost cities across the United States. Oh. So Larry writes, for most of history, half the population died birthing children that they had no choice in producing. They all were slaves. Still, the survivor loved those children. It's true. It's true. We've often lived in terrible times. Yeah, you shouldn't look at the retirement accounts right now unless you're simply going to acknowledge that you're not planning to sell off. Ironheart writes, I still find it absolutely amazing that I can listen to someone telling me about science in real time halfway across the world and answer my questions. I'm here for you, Ironheart. I am happy to talk science. You never know quite where science is going to come up. This morning, I'm going to out my husband's lack of scientific understanding now. My husband is a delightful human whose passion is music. Everyone needs to have a passion. His is music, not science. He didn't take very much science in university, if any, based on what he knows. And we're going to plant the bejesus out of our yard this year. And I ordered the stuff to build a elevated garden. And we already had some elevated beds. And he was arguing that we should move a couple of the elevated beds to a bricked-in patio that we have right off of our kitchen because it would be easier to go out and pick anything growing in an elevated bed right outside of the kitchen. And I was like, that gets no sunlight right there. And he's like, well, it gets more sunlight than where it is right now. And the problem was where it is right now is on the side of our garage that doesn't get sunlight in the evening because it's the southeast wall of the garage. But it gets sunlight like most of the day, but that's always when he's working, and his home office is in the front of the house, so he doesn't look out there and see it. The kitchen in our house is on the north wall of our house, which meant that if we put a garden there, it would basically get no sunlight at all. So I got to explain the sun's motion and the orientation of our house to my husband this morning. So you never know where the science is going to come in. And in my case, it came in figuring out where to put the gardens. Science. Our planet is using this time to improve. We'll be stronger. Yeah, that's a good sentiment, Susie. Keeper, who just finished driving through Pennsylvania where all the road stops were closed, you couldn't stop there, said, I just realized there are more toilets in space than open in rest areas in Pennsylvania. And Binary Ablaze responds, well, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois rest areas are all still open, which is why you need to get your ass here now before they close the toilets. And you have to go to the International Space Station, which smells really bad. All right, continuing on. I did make you check. Mythtown is like grumble, grumble, Benny, grumble. Yes, that is how we all feel. Pumice floats. That's how they find new undersea volcanoes. I guess I knew that too. I need to think more about things sometimes. So Larry asks, did Bennu really hoard rocks, or is Bennu a pile of rocks all the way down? It's a pile of rocks that doesn't give away its rocks as frequently as it might. I don't know if that counts as hoarding or not. Both. I'm going to go with Binary Ablaze's answer. Both. Oh, Susie, I saw those photos of Venice, and you may have seen them from me because I forwarded them. It turns out those weren't actually photos of Venice. Those were photos of Brno Island, and it just looks like Venice. Venice isn't improving that quickly. But there are major images documenting pollution over major cities, and it's like gone. The hydrogen's HSO4. No, that's sulfuric acid. SO4. Anyways, the pollution that they can measure from satellites, they're seeing noticeably less of it over cities right now. So our air is literally getting cleaner every day that we're not all out there driving. Susie, it's totally cool to focus on the positives. I took great joy in a video shared of someone walking their dog using a drone. Yeah. We do, yeah, we just get through day by day by day. And everyone hug your, well, no, don't stop. I screwed up. In Minecraft, where you're using virtual bodies, hug your extroverts. I'm an introvert. I am so glad I don't have to leave my house. And the most I have to do is like shower and put on lipstick to look semi-presentable on the internet. I feel safe behind a microphone. Small talk is death. I'm okay. Extroverts are not okay. So find ways to help get your extroverts into a virtual space where they can extrovert with other humans. Yeah, Midtown, Sacramento is not as crazy expensive as like San Francisco or Los Angeles. I have friends in both of those. And oh my God, what they pay for rent in San Mateo. Good Lord. Oh, we will miss you, fellow hoodlum. Dream well. Dream well. Oh. So Larry writes, I thank the universe every day that I scored a 957 square foot 2-bedroom to half price in Austin. Thank you, Section 8. And that is absolutely the perfect size apartment. When I lived in Austin, I had a apartment that was, I think it was 1,000 square feet is what it was advertised as, which means it was plus or minus. But it was that 2-bedroom, perfect size. Dogs can run around. You can live with one other person and not want to kill them. The apartment I had in Boston where I had a roommate for a while was, I think it was 1,200 square feet. It may have been a little bit more than that, but it was a dormered attic apartment. So you couldn't stand up in most of the apartment. But if you just stick your bed under the slopey part of the wall and your desk under the slopey part of the wall, it works. It works. It's fine. But yeah, those were the perfect size apartments to have. Volcanoes are very cool, Astro YYZ. Very cool. Oh, Larry, please tell me that you have watched the Glow television series with the welfare queen as one of the most badass women on the show. It's awesome. Binary Blaze. Tinker needs her nails trimmed, but also wants treats. She's conflicted. I understand that. I do understand that. So Susie, Venice is in a weird spot where I'm sure it is doing better without having so much tourism and so many boats churning up the waters in the canals, but it floods so much that is one of the primary sources of nastiness in the water is the flooding. SO2, thank you DPI 209. SO2, that's what they've been measuring in the atmosphere. AstroWise asks, I wonder if Janine Kreiper could come on. I adore her Twitter feed. I stan volcanoes. This is what I've realized. I am a stalker fan of volcanoes. Yes, let's have her on. Okay. Can you remind me in Discord? Because I will forget before I get to a point where I can send her an email inviting her on. Oh, yeah, Binary Blaze is saying the same thing. Please hug the extroverts. Talk to us. No, we won't actually hug you except in like Minecraft or I don't know. Does anyone still use Second Life? We will talk to you though. We're happy to talk to you. There are voice channels on the CosmoQuest Discord. I've been noticing them getting used more than ever before. Hug your dogs. It is true. Maybe your cats if they'll let you. Be careful with the cats. I like you. Do not get shredded. Poor Planetary Pan. I am so glad I'm an introvert. Virtual hugs to the extroverts. Yes, virtual hugs to the extroverts. I'm so far behind where I am in the timeline on this chat. I like the way Susie put it. I'm an extrovert with geeks and an introvert with muggles. What is a muggle? Okay. So a while back, I started, and I'm not the only one who did this. A whole bunch of us who are Harry Potter fans caught on to the fact that people with magical powers are called wizards and witches, and everyone else is referred to as a muggle. People without magical abilities are muggles. And so at science fiction conventions, there were the people who were there for the convention and the people who did not realize they had booked to stay in a hotel that would have a science fiction convention. And those people were the muggles. A muggle is someone who is basically outside the fandom. That's all it means, is someone outside the fandom. Yeah, Mythtown's pointing out people from the Bay Area buy and rent in the Sacramento area and make the trip to the Bay Area every day for work. And to give you a sense of that, the Amtrak train trip is, I think if you buy in bulk, it's $30 a day, an hour each direction to sit on the Amtrak and get dumped off at the BART station. It's a perfectly pleasing Amtrak trip. The drive can take significantly longer than Amtrak, and I have never ridden that train when it was not packed. Yeah. There's now a whole discussion on muggles. Yes, it's just glow, Larry. Just glow. Gee, it's the glorious ladies of wrestling. It's amazing. YouTube asks, why aren't antiprotons negatrons? Because when we first discovered electrons and positrons, people didn't realize they were the same thing except matter and antimatter. And it took a bit longer to figure out the whole thing with protons and antiprotons. And by then we'd stopped being cool in how we name things and become lame. Susie's like, we love volcanoes, but are potentially, there's no potentially in the allergic. I am totally allergic to volcanoes. It's the sulfur molecules in the VOG they put off. JB McCool says, you know San Mateo? I moved from there to Mountain View. I also know Mountain View. I used to go out and visit NASA Ames on a regular basis, and NASA Ames is in Mountain View. And I have a really good friend who lives in San Mateo, and I have a really good friend who lives in Sacramento. And so every chance I have to accept a talk or a meeting or a gig in San Francisco where someone else will pay my airfare, I'm gone. So I can go see all these people I adore who earn way more money than I do. Second Life is a weird ghost land. Okay. There we go. So Astro Wise points out people allergic to sulfa should avoid Rotorua in New Zealand where they have hot springs. Yes. You know, this actually, I went to hot springs in Budapest, And to be fair, I was so sick to begin with. So sick. So sick. And I thought the steam would help. It did not. And I'm now wondering if there was sulfate in it. I need to look this up. I don't know if it was just a hot spring or a mineral spring. Okay, things, that one I'm going to write down for myself. But not in the window that has the slides. Budapest, hot springs, mineral springs. Okay, I will figure that out later. These waters are sources rich in dissolved minerals with the variation depending on location. Okay, these are things I will need to look up. If you're ever in Budapest, do go to the hot springs. The buildings are amazing. Okay. That's all I've got. Are there any more questions? Yeah, so Iceland has always been on my bucket list. I need to look up the air composition, which is a really lame-ass thing to say. But it's on my bucket list. Puck, what are you doing? Hi, come here. Come here. Hi. Oh, shit. Dog. That's my coffee. Are you jealous much? Puck was doing the spinny thing that dogs do when they're either about to do something that you don't want them to do in the house or they're going to lay down, and I didn't know which. So I got his attention, which caused Stella to demand attention. Okay, so in a little less than an hour, we're going to start Astronomy Cast. I am going to go madly prep because for some reason I had it in my head that we were doing an episode on moons and tiny rocks that get trapped in Earth's orbit, but we're actually doing an episode on white dwarf mergers in all forms. And I don't know as much about that at this given moment, but hopefully an hour from now, I will know a lot more than I know right now. Yes, Fluffy Boy is right beside me. Killanova, it is true. So I'm going to go madly prep. I will be back in an hour with Fraser. And go get some food. Go catch up with somebody else. EJ just came on. Tap twice on your leg. I have totally on top of that one. But Stella, I'm not in a big enough chair to deal with both dogs. All right. So I'm going to go away for an hour and then I'll be back. And hopefully you'll be back too. But for now, Bother is on. Okay, let's raid Bother then. Raid? Let's raid Bother. There we go. So, for now though, this has been today's episode of the Daily Space. I am your host, Dr. Pamela Gay, and I wrote today's episode. We are a production of the Planetary Science Institute, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to exploring our solar system and beyond. This episode will be produced by Susie Murph, and we are here thanks to the generous contributions of people like you. Your bits, your subs, your patronage at patreon.com, all of that makes an amazing difference in keeping our show going. Thank you for all you can do. And in these super weird times, if you can't give, we get it. Just share the word. You never know whose life, might improve knowing there's this weird place where they can go and hang out with a whole bunch of other science nerds and learn and do science. So, wherever you are in the world, have an amazing morning, evening, or afternoon, and wash your hands. Bye, everyone.